Taste.
Look.
Smell.
Tree.
Bird. Bell. Touch.
Taste.
Look.
Smell.
Tree.
Fish.
Bird.
Bell.
So do as the poet says and listen.
And listen.
And listen.
And lesson.
And listen.
And listen.
The ARC is the home of collaborative research at the University of Glasgow and works to bring researchers, partners and ideas together from across the campus, the city and beyond. The ground floor, where we are just now, is open to the public all year round and hosts a wide range of events and projects inspired by the university's research. And there's a QR code on the way out that you can scan and you'll be able to sign up for a mailing list that will let you know. We've got a really huge programme of events this year, so if there's something that you're hoping to go to that maybe has sold out, or is now fully booked rather, don't be discouraged, get on the website, look for that no booking necessary category. Also, many events or many tickets are returned over this process, so log on to the website, check that event you were hoping to go to and you might be lucky. If you're hoping to go to the 10 events sold out, we've released another 90 tickets or so to that this evening, so you'll be able to grab those, and it's going to be an amazing event, so I do encourage you to come along to that. It's going to be happening at St Luke's tomorrow from 7:30. Thank you so much to our funders, to Glasgow City Heritage Trust, to Glasgow City Council, to our sponsors Denton's, and to all of our sponsors who make this event possible. Thank you to our amazing volunteers, some of whom are in the room now. The festival wouldn't be possible without you, so thank you so much for giving up your time. If you feel like making a donation to help us keep the festival free, you can do so by texting Doors Open, as it says on the screen, to 785. Text costs £5 plus one standard rate message. You can also make a donation in cash using the buckets that the volunteers have got as you exit, or if you would like to make a card donation, we have the facility to take card payments, so just let us know and we'll be happy to help you out there. I really hope you enjoy the event this evening. We have created a festival survey to collect your ideas about how we can make the festival better. If you do fill in your survey, there is a £100 prize for a Glasgow local business for you. So tell us what you think. There's a flyer that the volunteers will be able to give you, and that's got a QR code on the front. That will link you to the homepage of our website where the survey is located. So on to tonight's main event. I'm glad to introduce Well Knight, well-studied architecture at Glasgow School of Art, and this training has informed his approach to understanding the dynamic relationship between people and place. He spent the last 10 years observing, recording and interpreting Glasgow's built environment, from the celebrated work of Alexander Greig Thompson to the ubiquitous tiled tenement close, from some of the city's cherished eateries to scratch bakery and local newsagent. Every subject is explored through measurement and drawn by hand, elevated everyday buildings so that they are revealed afresh. Well night, everybody.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me. I did get Neil's briefing note for trousers so that we would come out on another. I don't think he should be described as warm attacked either. So, thank you very much and welcome along. I'll stand on the stage so that the carpet doesn't clash with my trousers. But, yeah. Anyhow, let's get on with the night map and artist process. So Stephen's read out my sort of artist statement there, but it's a lot about looking and drawing and taking time, which is a sort of harmonious triumvirate given the project that I endeavoured to take place with the Solomon drawing. But the architecture I work with has informed a lot of the way in which I've developed my architecture investigation. She talks about the architect's requirement to capture something as large or complex as a building on the size of a piece of paper. Architects must therefore work to a reduced scale using signs and symbols to represent the world. So the idea of survey is key to my work, and that's kind of a sort of subtitle of the project. So survey can be many things. It can be to look or to appraise, to take in a survey over a vista or from above. It can also be a statistical survey, or chiefly a British notion of a structural survey. Likewise, it can be a sort of civic engineering survey in which you're measuring angles and distances to be a numerical thing. So it can be both objective and subjective. So I thought it would help to sort of place the Solomon drawing in my kind of wheelhouse. So the normal sort of work I would endeavour to do. So the Solomon drawing is a step up in terms of ambition and scale. So rather than looking at a cityscape, I'm normally looking at much smaller ephemera, cuts, tiles, as mentioned by Stephen, furniture. So this is a 1 to 20, 1 to 50 rather, section drawing through a tenement on Fotheringay Road. And so my process would normally be visiting the client or occupier. And another significant thing about my process is that I never make drawings without the say-so and the willingness of the stakeholder, be that a newsagent or a baker or somebody who lives in a tenement flat. And that's interesting given the Solomon drawing belongs to the city, so I sort of the civic city have to kind of the gatekeepers to that project as the commissioners, but still felt like this is a gift to those that belong here, so it's my gift to the city. But yeah, here, so we'll do a quick rough survey sketch to show the drawing on a piece of paper, so reducing, looking at scale again. And then a more detailed one in terms of a section through the close. So this would be sort of from my understanding as to what would happen if you cut through the building at that point. So a section drawing, for those that aren't familiar with architectural parlance, is a slice through, or sort of a vertical plane through a building. So here, we're cutting from the roof down to the ground floor and revealing a view that otherwise might not be experienced, though you may trudge up and down those stairs. And then again, looking at elevation of the building and taking in stone course details, and then obviously taking lots of photographs. And then a much more detailed survey, and the complexity of that is something to get my head around once I return to a blank piece of paper. But essentially all these dimensions line up and help me sort of decodify the complexity of this building. And then the final drawing here, so the drawing there drawn in earth in pencil, and then 0.2 pen, and then lastly rendered in watercolour. Architects obviously normally use line weights, so thicker lines for things we're cutting through, and then also lighter line weights for more detailed or kind of less important. There's a hierarchy of information within the drawing, so something like tenement tiles might be lighter. But here, given I'm using watercolour, I can use that to show depth and shade and shadow as well. Now this is a drawing by George Aitchison, This was a real interesting sort of find for me as someone who was kind of endeavouring this kind of similar practice of looking at interiors and looking at section cutting and looking at buildings in great detail. And often I sort of question my sanity in terms of what I'm doing, what I'm achieving by this level of production. But there's a great essay here by an architect called Helen Thomas who talked about a reflection on non-productive expenditure, which I think I can often use as a way of justifying procrastination. Anyway, I'll back myself here before getting into someone drawing. But the time-consuming activity of drawing has been at the heart of architectural practice since the Renaissance, when architecture became elevated from craft to an intellectual pursuit carried out remotely from the site of construction. It's kind of themes that Neil was talking about earlier. In the separation of bodily labour of craft and construction from the conceptual work of art, drawing became the means through which intentions were imagined, resolved and communicated. As the medium of endeavour continues to migrate from the corporal to the conceptual, from vigorous manual labour constructing a final product, a building, to the fine control of the hand producing a drawing, and then to almost purely intellectual exertion of the virtual environment, so transform the relationship of the work to their work. So this kind of, there's a lot of words in there, but it's effectively talking about the means of architectural drawing and the change in what that has been. Embodied in every architectural drawing, whether made by hand or on the computer, is the time expended in making it. The pecuniary cost of this labour is offset in the value accrued by the various roles that the drawing might play, as a document for communicating instructions, or selling ideas, or acquiring cultural capital. Some drawings have more tangible uses than others, and the cost of their production is more easily measured and balanced with an economic framework of practice. So sometimes architects are making drawings to sell to a big client, in this case the investor. A lot of time for perhaps little initial income is of worth for the fee the developer might pay in the long term. Or equally, it's about getting information to an engineer or an engineer or a plumber or whoever it is, a tiler, to get the information done quickly. So there's always a limit and a sort of a cost-time ratio. However, myself and George Aitchison appear to sit outside this framework. And here we can see, at first glance, the object is conventional as its subject. A wall elevated for a morning room in an elegant house in Mayfair, London. It's not quite Fotheringay Road, Portshield, it's not far off. Made to enhance its picture and also perhaps a record of a design whose realisation and duration is contingent on the fashions of the time. Then from a long rectangle of the paper, the edges of the drawing trace the cut of the section that isolates the room. It is surrounded by an emptiness that presses in from all sides. It is shut behind the double doors and blankly reflects in the mirror above the ornate fireplace. The top meets with a simple cornice, the bottom with deep skirting board, interrupted by a mantle that connects the two closed dark doors opening. And it goes on to talk about the intricacy of these sort of nymph-like or angel-like figures, each carefully hand-drawn. And in its manual production, it could be seen as something that's sort of a wasted time or a wasted talent. But in its kind of overload on the senses and in its celebration of something quite banal as wallpaper, perhaps, I think it becomes something else altogether. In Aitchison's drawing, the consummate technique and the squandering of its brilliance in youthful spectacle grasps the viewer's attention. In a commercial sense, this expenditure is non-productive. As one of a series of beautiful objects, however, this labour results in reward of social status and cultural capital. And though I don't claim much of either of those two things, there's something about that really shines with my work in terms of elevating the normal and having the time to give every day a bit more dignity. At which point we came to the Sullivan drawing. So this was a competition to update the drawing run by the Glasgow City Heritage Trust. And here we can see, I've noted in a couple of Neil's slides, the drawing in its extent. So it stretches from Gilmore Hill, from what is now the university in the west of the city, to the cathedral. And the drawing is packed full of life and activity and great detail. And so in my approach to the drawing of the contemporary version in 2022, I just want to the bottom of the slide cut off slightly, but it was about understanding and appreciating Sullivan's technique and his level of detail and craft, which I think sort of chimed with the idea of my work to now. And also the democracy of the drawing, so the key buildings of the cathedral and the civic buildings and squares and streets were treated with as much dignity as the back courts and the back lanes and the wines that Neil talked about. And that for me was the sort of the charm and the sort of practical detail of the drawing that makes it a relevant document today. They don't focus from the time we can look at this drawing and see in comparison to that just how rich and detailed and rewarding Sullivan's tireless, time-taken work was. Likewise, the other thing that I felt my response to the drawing was it was a celebration of that drawing rather than an exercise in detailed drawing of the city today in terms of accuracy. So rather than attempt to, which I sort of hopefully did both, but the emphasis was more on celebrating the drawing rather than correcting the drawing and updating it to today's streetscape. Another thing about the drawing is it's a bird's eye view. And I was listening to a program in which there was a stage designer, whose name escapes me, Ed Devlin, and she was interviewed about the sort of cultural impact that she's had on her work. She's very contemporary and very forward-thinking in how she breaks the fourth wall of the traditional relationship between a musician and their audience. That's the well worth looking at. But she talked of this from her childhood in Rye, of a model village, an accurate model town of where she grew up. And she said something magical happens in this sort of bird's eye view. Once you're above the whole system and you can see the ecosystem in which you live, the roads, the streets, the parks, the trees, the churches, and yet at the same time you can place yourself in that point outside a sweet shop or the butcher's or in a park. And that sort of dynamic of seeing yourself in time and space was something that Solomon really captured in his drawing. Now, there's speculation about Solomon whether he took a hot air balloon up the city. Obviously, the Girls Fighter project really heavily on that with their beautiful graphics of Solomon rising above the city. We didn't have the health and safety certificates to do such things. We did have drone technology. There is something, even if you don't believe that the hot air balloon went up, and somebody there has looked at all the newspapers and you think the hot air balloon somewhere above the south side of the city in 1864 may have made headlines. However, we did have drone footage, so John from Eye in the Sky Glasgow was very helpful in terms of getting it. Well, this is from above Lauriston looking north. And this is kind of the first kind of this process of suddenly seeing this footage and the city beyond, and then comparing it back to the print of the Solomon drawing as well. So suddenly began to realise the task which I'd been given was going to be quite something. At the same time, our family expanded from just Jack and Rach to Jack, Rach and Josie. So nothing like having your, changing a few things at home and at work at the same time. So two great creative projects running side by side. Particularly, I was nearly walking by the time I finished the drawing. So I don't know who's developed more. I think of age at the same rate as she's grown. But in my pitch to the City Heritage Trust, it was about understanding the drawing, really getting using that as the framework and the basis of updating that drawing. I felt it was a pointless exercise to suddenly start trying to project new views of the city, and though Southsiders will complain with the drawing being cropped about 2 blocks south of the Clyde, there was enough information and there was enough to get my teeth into, running from effectively the Sheriff Court north to almost sort of Town Head area, so there's enough to update within that. So the first layer was to understand the drawing in relation to the factual reality of the city at that time by looking at OS maps from the time. So I traced the drawing effectively at street level to understand and clarify the accuracy of someone's drawing, and then went through the OS maps and effectively labelled each street. So here we are comparing the area on Clydeswood Square and then labelling each of the streets that existed from the drawing. So you can see that rather than in effect, tracing the streetscape around the blocks of his perspective. And then this was the first sort of layer. So here you can see my red pen overlay. The drawing's obviously a little wider than that, but the scan's been cropped. But you can see how I sort of simplified and decodified the drawing to make a rolled out map over that, the drawing. So we're not worrying too much about topography or building mass or vegetation or detail of horse and carts and boats and chimney stacks and all the joy of the drawing. It's purely about understanding what streets where and the name of that street in correspondence with the OS map at the time. I'm afraid it is like a good wedding cake, and we have a few layers here to get our teeth into, but this is effectively then flattening that drawing, drapes over the topography and perspective, separating that. So we did the streets in 1864 map are the same today, so that's very handy in terms of layering one collection of information upon the other, with the noticeable introduction of the M8 motorway and the railway lines crossing the Clyde. So effectively then I was looking to draw a contemporary street plan that would match with the historic street plan over the top of that. And at roughly the same points in the city, trace out and mark out where motorways and flyovers would be. So here we can see the sort of Anderston end of Argyle Street, where it meets Argyle Street and the M8 motorway coming across. So there's three layers of the same part of the drawing here. So the Solomon drawing on the left, my initial trace to look out what these streets were there, and then this second layer where I'm beginning to trace on the M8 motorway just in pencil with the various pedestrian flyovers that try and connect the city east to west. And then this gives us this pretty wild but interesting kind of flattened block plan of the city. So here we can now see to the left the area around Central Station and the River Clyde, and then to the right the People's Palace in Glasgow Green. And then within that sort of flattened block plan, I was then beginning to place out the kind of framework of the roofscape of the building. So there's no mapping here done. It's all as if everything has been flattened down to one sheet, drapes over the topography of the city. And that would about kind of then understand the relationship. So then this gives me a sort of net plan at ground floor level of what is where. I felt like an elite athlete always saying sort of trust the process, but there was an element of that where you were questioning what you were doing. But in my mind, it was slowly but surely coming together. So then that final drawing, so here we are, every building in Glasgow flattened and placed on the Solomon map. And then layer 3, this is where the city really began to grow and come alive. So you are playing God in instantly bringing things up from nothing and making the city back to what you recognise it from the sort of satellite imagery and the aerial footage that I have from the drone pilot. I would say I did heavily rely on a certain piece of software from a certain well-known search engine, but you can't mention their name for copyright reasons. But within that, effectively it allows you to take a relative height from sea level to the top of the building, from sea level to ground level, and then ground level to the top of the building, to then work out a height at scale. The other thing that was critical to the drawing was not only placing the buildings accurately on the map, but also redrawing them accurately to the same scale as the map. So I measured a building that existed in the Solomon drawing, and then that continues to exist today to get the sort of relative scale in the drawing, if that makes sense. It's roughly 1 to 3,000 scale. So that meant that the settlement drawing the East End is going to be the same in the West. But likewise, Cineworld was going to be drawn to the height that it is in comparison to that mentioned tenement. So I didn't want the city to become kind of bizarre Gotham City. I wanted it to be as true to the reality of it is. And that came at the cost of losing some of the clarity of the streetscapes, because obviously as we've been learning, the city has grown in height. But this painstaking process gives us a drawing that begins to do this sort of thing. Likewise, Solomon benefited from all the roads being flat for horses. You didn't have to contend with flyovers and tunnels, and the M8 rising above the Clyde and then dropping down underneath Charing Cross and then rising up again as it goes north. So there was a lot of, I knew these were the two most complicated bits of infrastructure in terms of, Central Station and the arrival points in the Kingston Bridge. So these were the two sort of it's the massing that I tackled first. Tempting though it would have been to start somewhere simpler. And then here we can begin to have a bit of fun with Lightbox. It's not particularly clear, but you can begin to see the change in scale of the city in terms of St Enoch. Obviously there's been 2 iterations of buildings on that site, the station having demolished the blocks on the Solomon drawing, and then the shopping centre succeeding the station. And then likewise on the left hand side, the dramatic change at Charing Cross when the motorway comes through. And then here you can begin to slowly see my sort of cardboard box version of the city, with no detail on the facades, but you can begin to see that this is what architects call massing, so the sort of form and shapes of the buildings. And we can begin to see the blocks of the city changing, and the scale of our buildings by the Clyde and the bridges. And also, obviously, some of the bridges existed in the Solomon drawings. That's one of the few simple exercises in tracing from the original drawing, but much has changed. And the final massing drawing. There's not much to say. I guess you can begin to see the change in the skyline as well from the original drawing. So, obviously, rather than having chimney stacks in mills or warehouses to the north of the city, now it's high-rise buildings at Carcadens and University. I think there's a little bit of creative license in sort of punctuating them over the campuses, but the campuses in the original drawing sort of sit quite far back. But you can begin to understand the sort of, the kind of, I guess you'd call it urban grain of the city changing. The sort of smaller housing in the east around Bridgeton, and then the density of that city around the central business districts, and then things around the Clyde as well. So the sort of height of that means you do lose a bit of the clarity of sort of streetscape left to right, and you kind of lose the grid in it a little bit. So you don't see Solomon's quite clear kind of map elements of the drawing. So then the 5th layer of the drawing is a pen drawing, so over the top of that, the massing drawing, and that was more about adding the elevations of each and every building, so understanding the floor heights, and that would also add to the sort of understanding of scale. So Solomon very carefully draws every single window in every single tenement so you can understand their 4 stories high. And though therefore that might make some of the horses seem slightly tall, it does mean that you can understand the sort of human scale in relation to the buildings drawn. So therefore I had to do the same. And then this is a little area around Kingston Bridge. All these drawings are online at the Gallup Sparse website. You can zoom in a lot greater detail, and I can show you here. But the talk wouldn't be very fun if I was sort of running around desperately and scrolling and zooming at the same time. But do take the time to look either outside or on the website. But you can begin to see detail being added, and equally understanding how many lanes are on the motorway, and again the height of the sign above, and equally the roofscape, accurately drawing skylights in factories or windows in residential blocks. Solomon doesn't, in his drawings, he doesn't paint the roads, and I think that was a critical decision that I made quite early on, because I think that does give you the idea of what is open and clear space in comparison to the sort of density of the city around it. We'll come on to that later on. But here the drawing is beginning to reward me at last, I suppose, where you can see 2 like-for-like shots. I think the whole aim of going through the process of carefully drawing Solomon's drawings meant that you could not only project forward from his piece, but also look back and place yourself in time and history. So it hopes to as well as sort of provoke questions for the future, but it does hope to sort of look through time and across time in a way that you wouldn't necessarily appreciate all of. Obviously, we can recognise the cathedral from Solomon's drawing, but there's bits within there that you may be able to place as accurately as you can now, having me painstakingly gone through that process. And we can see that goods yard that Neil was talking about in the previous talk, college lands, gushing of land from the train. And then here the drawing, this gives you an idea of the scale of it. It's about 1.3 metres long, about 50 centimetres high. So my A2 light box didn't quite stretch the full length, so I was kind of moving across the drawing. And you can see my, it's a well-worked drawing of layers, but yeah, you can see I'm not particularly precious. You can see my tummy has flopped over the bottom edge of the drawing there. But yeah, the light box obviously enabled me to look through the drawing to add to the layers. And then here's the final black and white version of the drawing. You can purchase prints in black and white and colour. But the black and white version, is kind of more graphic, but you can still begin to pick out details of the city and at this point I've added railway lines and people and cars. I think in terms of the using Google, the Google lorry must have gone around during lockdown because the Kingston Bridge is surprisingly empty. There was a point where I thought I can't accurately draw every single car in the city at this point, so maybe it's a help rather than a hindrance to have such a quiet, desolate city at that point. But yeah, I've sort of on. Finally, in terms of adding watercolour, we scanned that black and white, so it didn't mean not all again, because the drawing at that point was on detail paper in order to be able to be translucent to make the layered into it. But here, another sort of graphic precision, another precision, not necessarily my favourite. Well, someone drew all the buildings in the sort of same yellowy or white hue to show the sort of stone nature of the buildings at the time. But obviously now we have a city that has a wide pattern of metal, glass, and stone, brick, you name it, we have it on our skyline. So I had to decide that in reality I had to just be faithful to what I saw. So it did mean painting each building and then therefore getting a really authentic and truthful representation of the city. So I don't want to sort of diminish or reduce the city too much graphically, but it did take more time. And then here we can begin to see, it does look a little bit like it's been a beautiful snowfall with the white roads, but I think the white adds to the clarity. But here we can see, I'm painting around Finiston with that great, should be perhaps listed Atlar pitch, a relic of Glasgow of old. And then, looking up north towards Park Circus and the Thameses beyond. And then to the right-hand side, we can see the city centre, streets. And like I see, someone drew empty plots and also had a few construction sites within his drawing, so there's a few gap sites in mine as well, and a few construction sites that have changed even since the drawing's been done. And so you can see there, just behind our house, there's a block there that I think may have been developed. So the drawing is really a record of a city in time, but it's, as we know, it's ever evolving, ever changing, and hopefully no one has to do this for a few years at least, but it makes you realise quite how quickly things are changing. And then here we are, the final colour versions. And I did leave the sky typically at the very last minute, so it's not quite a comfortable sky, but there was a bit of panic stations when I first drew that. Having gone through the sort of painstaking process of carefully drawing the buildings, I found things kind of to the last minute. You can see even the grass on Glasgow Green, I think, has changed colour because there's been a gig there at some point, and then the river. I think shadow as well gives, helps give the feeling of depth in the drawing. Obviously, someone is a master in showing buildings in their physical manifestations that are not sort of two-dimensional drawing, just trying to make the drawing as alive and as sort of robust as possible. You can begin to pick up. And the other thing about his, in terms of looking at it, was he does accentuate slightly certain landmarks. So I think the statue in George Square was drawn a lot taller than it is in reality, and perhaps other sort of spires or point of interest on the horizon are accentuated slightly. But you can now, on the Gallows website, effectively fade between my drawing and Solomon's, and you can really see the change. I just wanted to end the talk with a great quote from an author about Glasgow. I think it really is the spirit of the drawing and of my sort of feelings for the city. There's Ian Nairn, who writes in Nairn's Towns in 1967. I found that what is without doubt the most friendly of Britain's big cities and probably the most dignified and coherent as well. It looks it is much more like the best parts of some American cities, Boston or Philadelphia, than anywhere in England. So I can say that. But a walk along any of the streets will show the difference. In America, the average contact is unpleasant, a mixture of indifference and neurosis. Any Glasgow walk is inflected by a multitude of human contacts. In shops, under umbrellas, there's a good deal of rain in Glasgow, even from policemen. And each of them seems to be a person-to-person recognition, not the mutual hate of cogs in a machine who knows the plight but cannot escape it. Glasgow is so coherent and strongly patterned. At every street corner you know where you are, in time as well as in space. Not as an antiquarian exercise, but through the living pattern of the city. And I do hope that this drawing goes some way in trying to capture some of that magic. Thank you.
Well, I think the project was really amazing to see it like that. We were talking maybe turning into a mural, maybe?
Yeah, detailed up, essentially.
Would you say that is one of the longest drawing projects you've ever undertaken?
Absolutely, yeah. We can start doing things, but yeah, this is 8 months. I think it was in saying, you know, I remember at one point being at Central Station thinking that was good progress, but it was between 10 weeks. And I look back at my application this week, you know, one more buildings, 1 week, 1 week, printing frame 1 week, rationality was almost December. You know, it's painstaking. I don't know. I don't think, with a lot of things like that, you sometimes think, should I have done something differently, but I don't.
Well, this is an amazing achievement. I'm head of grants at Historical Environment in Scotland, and just to pass, generally, do you have any ambitions to do this project? Would you like to?
Well, I could do sort of a Southern tour because he's done Edinburgh and Newcastle, New York. He did New York 10 years after, so maybe. I think in the darker days, the fact that it was Glasgow made it easier. And I think the fact that you knew the city kind of meant you could place yourself in the point in the drawing in the city. I don't really want to make the ideas of cities my sort of life's work. But I mean, yeah, I would willingly assist with someone else, or yeah, I mean, I wouldn't really help, but it's quite a relief to get back to being scale as well. But yeah. I do think also his Glasgow drawing is a lot more coherent than perhaps I was looking at the London one today, and it's, you know, I don't know London that well, but it maybe, you know, it seems as a view and as a bit to set up, it's quite kind of natural. Whereas it's, you know, hard to capture cities with more complex topography, like Newcastle, for example, is very much in the Tyne Valley, so it's going to be more difficult to kind of map the streets within that context. But yeah, I mean, you know, if Edinburgh approached me, you Sheffield,
Are there any other questions? Yeah.
Yeah, well, there's a few originals in the city of the actually one. And so originally it was in the illustrated views of plans. And so there's a real variety in the quality and drawing of those flowers. So I've seen the tropical one, the inverted one there in Mott's, I'm not sure that's on for level 7 at the library. And then also the art school have a black and white version, and each is different, and each is kind of awarding in its own right. But yeah, they're well worth studying. Oh, so my original, sorry. Right, okay, my original is at the trust offices, and I have, and yeah, at the land drawings as well, so they're all there, but the hope is that they'll find a public home. But yeah, in the meantime, we'll make those in there available to view. Yeah, no, please do go along and have a look, I'm sure. Yeah. We did a week-long exhibition at the New Glasgow Society a while back, but yeah, the hope is to sort of find a, maybe make more of it, I think. It can't fit in my cupboard at home.
It's just an answer to your question on what the maturity and just a copy of it, so you can come and still maybe see it alongside the Zoom one.
Okay, well, please join me in thanking Romain.